Hi, I'm JJ. Welcome or welcome back. This is my Historathon Q2 wrap-up. I read a few books, I took a lot of notes, and I forgot to write the names of the authors for the books, so I'm going to include that down below. But I read about the Crusades. It was a general Crusades book. I do want to go more in detail on some of the things that I found interesting. But basically, it was talking, kind of the lead up to the Crusades, the main figures in each of them. So, the ones that we're familiar with, Saladin, Richard the First, and then you learn about Edward the First was in it, Henry the Third was in it, most of the people that you kind of know about in history are all in it in some way. But right now, I'm just going to talk about the ones that I took notes on. And what I found fascinating was the fact that so the Franks started the Crusades. A lot of the times, me especially, when I think of the Crusades, you think of the English kings who went, but then you think of Isbella and Spain and all of that. But so the Franks started it, and then it mentioned how it's so easy to superimpose religious piety or piety, self-righteousness and all of that to any current conflicts. And so they used religious fervor combined with greed as a land grab to try to loot the conquer area, but by saying that they were trying to free the holy sites from the Muslims. So I liked that framing. It seemed accurate. And so the first couple Crusades were all about religious fervor, and then they had to, when they couldn't get enough people to sign up, it became about looting and greed and prestige, and you had to do it if your opposing kingdom was going to do it. You couldn't leave them with all the glory, but you didn't want to leave without them going too, because then your homeland would be advocated essentially and able to get conquered there at home while you were away. So there was a lot of interesting context to all of it that was going on. And so another thing that I found fascinating was the mention of the Melisandre Psalter, which was around 1135. And it was a psalter that, the Christians used, a religious book. But the cover was infused with art and stuff that you could see the cultural influence from that time period, including Arab influenced art. And so it was showing how that always was, which, since it was infused with cultural significance from all areas, that not always was everything about hatred and conquest, that sometimes there was proof at these times that multiple cultures influenced each other with art, medicine, and different stuff like that, so that they at times could live in harmony in between the warring aspects, which was interesting. And so it also talked about religious fervor versus populism, and how once they couldn't get it popular enough, like the priests or the Pope and stuff offered blanket absolution for crimes and sins, and then that would encourage people to get up and do it, which had me down a whole bunch of different rabbit holes of, you know, why you could be absolved for future killings, knowing that you were going to go and do killing. Just, I don't know, it astounds me. And so then you have when a royal crown joins, which is like what I was talking about, who inherits or controls the throne during your absence. These were all things that started to come up as the movement in the Crusades spread, so that you have to figure out if it's worth going or not, if your kingdom at home will be protected or not if you go out and do that. So between the First and Second Crusade, despite Crusaders winning, there was a gap between Crusades because of all the individual country issues. So like figuring out if it's worth going. There had civil wars. One of them would have been Matilda and Stephen, for that like almost 2 decades war that I talked about when I talked about Matilda's biography, but also is featured highly in the Pillars of the Earth, as you see what that continued civil war did on the peasants and common people there, and how that caused a lack of participants. And then if they had lost the First Crusade, they probably wouldn't have been any others, but since they did lose or win, they felt it was their religious right to continue, you know, God ordained and all that stuff, manifest destiny that continued on throughout history. So then you have this nationalism. As more and more countries and royals joined the Crusades, you had a bigger army going forward, but now you had all these petty disagreements, issues, struggles within your ranks that resulted because individual countries' nationalism was more important than the overall goal of this conquest. So you also, the Roman Catholic Church, which was endorsing and enabling the Crusades, versus the Eastern Orthodox churches. So then that's interesting too, because you get to kind of get this religious schism that I didn't think about before. As so you get the Christian schism between Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox, but you also get with the Muslims, you get the Sunni and the Shia schism as well. And whoever almost would have been the first to not consolidate, but you know, basically get past those grievances would have advanced the best. So that's when Saladin, when he basically not combined, but he was able to get the Sunni and the Shia together to try for his expansion. Why he was successful, because he didn't have as much of the bickering at first, because they had this common goal that they were working towards, as he conquered a bunch and stabilized that region for a while. You also get to learn about the formation of the Knights Templars as well as the Hospitallers. You get to learn about the medicinal practices that were happening during that era. You have the priests and the Catholics versus the Muslim Eastern medicine, which was interesting to see the contrasts there. And then it also, so you learn about each crusade and specific crusade, winners and losers. I didn't so much like all the individual battles. That just wasn't interesting to me. It was the overall context that I enjoyed. But I did like how it all came together at the end when he was saying how even today the Crusades are romanticized. So like in including with the creation of Israel post-World War II, the British occupation of Palestine post-World War I, the war on terror, Trump's war on Iran. All of this is romanticizing the Crusades and this, this fight against the, Muslims, or that they basically say a crusade. You're going in there and you're taking back and taking what's back what's ours. That mentality that it's ours is continuously on display way after the Crusades ended. And I thought that was a great way to wrap it all up and see how it's still important today to understand the reasons for it, the reasons that it kept they kept going back to it, and that they lasted for so long, and what both sides, their philosophies and ideas and rationales for going all were. It was interesting. I really did like it. And then I read or listened to a story or a book about, or the biography of Edward I. So he was the son of Henry III, and Henry III was the son of King John. So going back to my previous mentioning of Matilda, so Matilda, or Maud, Queen Maud, she was, in her mind, usurped by the throne by her cousin Stephen. Stephen became king, but then upon his death, it went to her son, Henry II. Henry II was married to Eleanor of Aquitaine. They had Richard I, who was part of the Crusades, as well as John, the youngest son, who became king as well. And King John, and then had Henry III, and then Henry III had Edward I. So Edward I, his time period was during the Crusades, during the plague. So he also lost multiple children at a young age. And he was infamous for his war with Wales, as well as his war with Scotland. He lived under the, not only the mentality of the Crusade era that I just mentioned, but his grandfather, King John, was forced to sign the Magna Carta to limit the rule of kings because of how badly John governed and mistreated his nobles and stuff who rose against him. So he had this limited power. And so he had this chip on his shoulder to try to regain all the lands and all the power that was lost by his grandfather in the Magna Carta. He was trying to restake his dominance and his insert his power that he believed was God ordained. And then also with the looming idea of the Crusades, it became this inherent right that he felt that he had to essentially start an empire, and why he needed to bring Wales to heel, and then later Scotland. And so with Wales, which was Britain, the Britons, there was a history of Briton-English conflicts. It's the origin of King Arthur. He was Welsh. In a lot of the legends, they really took him on as one of the original Britons who defined convention and rose up and made a better Britain in their estimates. And during this time, so he fought with Wales, tried to make them recognize his claim over them, which they eventually, after the war and stuff, ended up doing. He also stripped the money changing rights from the Jews and gave it to the churches so that the Jews could no longer be money lenders, which then a lot of them did not have a whole lot of options elsewhere because there was so much anti-Semitism amongst them. He also executed around half of the Jewish men, declaring them fraudulent with coins. So once he needed more money to try to get the Crusades and to build his empire after all these wars that he was having, he kept going in debt, so then he needed to get money somehow. And so he tried to remint coins and then declared a whole bunch of thieves and fraudulent coin dealers. And the ones that he said were most fraudulent in that aspect were Jews. Now, some of them were because they just had all their rights and money lending rights and power stripped away, so they couldn't make ends meet. So some of them did kind of skim off the top when it came to cutting down coins and stuff. But you know, killing half of the population because a few of them were doing that was one of the worst things he's remembered for now. But at the time, his treatment of the Jews was one of the things that his noblemen and the churches loved most about him. So in addition to that, he also had, so that was the largest Jewish execution, extermination in English history. But then he later basically expelled all the Jews from England, and that was one of the other things that they, his noblemen and the religious leaders loved about him. But his wife was, the queen, was infamous for seizing Jewish land and got rich off of it once they were saying that they were fraudulent and killing them for it or sending them away and stuff. She seized all their land. The noblemen and the religious leaders hated her for that. They hated that, you know, that she was doing it, and then they hated that it was the Jews who had all that power that she was trying to steal to begin with. And so to try to prevent Jewish land seizing and to raise money for the crown, but really due to their own anti-Semitism, they convinced him to expel all the Jews from England. And then eventually he also went to war with Scotland, which is where we have, you know, the famous Braveheart movie about William Wallace. And so it talked a lot about the comparisons between Wales and Scotland. Both were considered uncivilized. They were pastoral, they were farmers and stuff. They weren't like noblemen or of noble birth, and therefore they didn't think that they were good enough. And so Scotland was always against sublimation to the English crown, even more so than Wales. Wales kind of always acknowledged that the King of England was their king. They just didn't always want to follow him. Scotland refused that they were even part of the English crown. They wanted their own independence. So it was interesting to see all of that play out and be mentioned within there about the ways that they were alike and different. Overall, I really enjoyed it. It was fascinating to look at that time period. And then we know that Edward I has Edward II, who then has to abdicate the throne, and his son Richard III is the one who takes over. So I've done videos about that too when I was talking about reading about Edward II and reading The World Without End in that time period for our historical fiction. And what's fascinating is that if you haven't listened to Christopher Marlowe's Edward II play, it's very funny and witty and well done, but it kind of talks about how Henry had to abdicate, and it made his wife, Isbella, and her lover, I forget his name at the moment, like these conniving schemers who were just morally corrupt and horrible people. And it almost made you like kind of feel sorry for Henry in a way, because they made her such a villain. But it is a really good play, and I do recommend it. Anyway, another one that I read was, or listened to was Dark Queens. And this is the Merovingian dynasty of the 6th century. And I wanted to read this one because I know very little about medieval history, that time period. And this was Francia. And I didn't know anything about it. And so what was interesting is, so it's the rivalry between, I'm probably really gonna butcher these names, Brundahild and Frindagug, yeah. So Brunhild was very pious. She was married to the king, and she bore him a couple of children, and once her duty was over, she's like, can I have my freedom? Can you divorce me? And can I please go to the nunnery? Because she did not want to be around her king at all, which I find fascinating. And then Frindagund was a former slave who killed Brunhild's sister, and then became queen in her own right. And so they had a 45-year-old feud so it was longer than the War of the Roses. It was brutal. Like if you think of any of the Roman Caesars and stuff, especially the Claudian, the Judo-Claudian line, all the way that they killed each other and killed everybody in their family, and how Claudius was the only one left. It is very similar to that, so it was very interesting. And so what's interesting is that so they were erased from history after being rewritten as the villains. So they were seen as mad queens or Jezebels, just like, when you think of Agrippina, Messalina, Cleopatra, and then even when you do Catherine de Medici, in current time, Mary, Queen Mary, Bloody Mary, like all the ones that you say are crazy just because you didn't want to have a woman in power. Yes, some of them did some very awful things, but a lot of it was also rewritten by the men who came after them, or the rulers who came after them, who wanted to replace them, or if they couldn't erase them completely, they needed to rewrite them in some way. And that's what happened to these women. And so they used it as reasons why women shouldn't rule when they were mentioned in history at all. Now, in all the history I've ever done, I've never heard about either of these two, and I found them absolutely fascinating. And so this campaign of erasure and rewriting them as villains was because they're the Merovingian dynasty was supplanted and replaced by Charlemagne's family. And then obviously they didn't want it to look like the people before them were civilized and advanced and smart and did all these things. So they made it look like there was very little establishment ahead of them, that they created the world, that they brought them into the future and did all this stuff, when in reality now we know that is not the truth. So remnants of them still existed in the fairy tales. So the Frenagog, the former slave killer, who became like the stepmother and then tried to get her own kids on the throne, became incorporated in all the a lot of the evil stepmother stories in Norse mythology, as well as some Cinderella retellings. And then later, I don't remember which of the women, probably her because she was the most evil of the two, was included in Shakespeare's Macbeth. But also, I forget which one was also included in the opera, a famous opera where they were the villain and very unlikable, and they were teased. And they're the whole reason we have It's Not Over Till the Fat Lady Sings, because when they came on stage to sing at the end, it was, I forget which one of these, I think it was Brunhild. And they wanted to tease her and make fun of her. And so they had her, a big lady, singing so that they could humiliate her, essentially. And then most modernly, elements of them were included in Cersei from the Game of Thrones, the Song of Ice and Fire books. So the ending of the Roman Empire and ushering in of the medieval age is what this dynasty encompassed. And the borders that they created as they expanded their dynasty are still mostly in use in parts of Europe today. During their reign, they have a mandate that predated the Magna Carta that limited the powers of rulers. And many of these Frankish laws are later inspired into European laws. And women had more rights during this time than under the Romans, Renaissance, or medieval laws, even though they were still only useful primarily for childbearing. And nowadays they would send, they would send the troublesome women to the insane asylums. Back then it was always to convents, which I guess you kind of also see in Hamlet with Ophelia. And then with Brunhild being very pious in choosing the nunnery, it was the starting of the first female monastery in Francia, and it lasted for over 1,000 years until the French Revolution. And she later even became regent. So Brunhild was fascinating. She became regent for her son, grandson, and great-grandson. She lived, I think she was like pushing 70 before they brutally murdered her in a kind of a retelling of Jezebel by having her pulled apart by horses and basically wanting to show the extent of a woman reaching for power and what will happen to them if they reach too far. They wanted to make her a symbol of that, kind of like the Icarus flying too close to the sun warning. And so many remnants of their empire, including Brunhild's tomb, were destroyed during the revolution, but had lived or had been around since before then. And so they collected a lot of holy relics, including parts of the Holy Cross from the Byzantine Empire. So the Byzantine Empire at the time, at this time, the 6th century, had been the place with the most holy relics and sites, which is why then when they were taken by the Ottoman Empire in Constantinople, fell, became Istanbul, part of what they were trying to reclaim in a way through the Crusades was even if they couldn't get all the holy sites back, they wanted those holy relics because that was where they felt their power was. It was what brought people to different churches, which what funded money to that church and to that region and stuff. So they really wanted their holy relics. And Brunhild had been able to contact one of the Byzantine queens to get a piece of the Holy Cross, and they had it in their site, obviously, until the Crusades happened in full. And then I would recommend that book. That was called Dark Queens, and I did write that one down. That was by Shelley Puhak. And then I also did read about the families of Eleanor of Aquitaine, and she had a lot of family members. It talked about the women, though. So she had, I think, like 9 or 10 children. Not all of them lived into adulthood. They had a couple of them that died really young. I know Henry, the young King Henry died. I think he was able to have like 1 or 2 kids. I think he did get married. I'm not quite sure on him. But then you had Richard, Gregory, and John. The fact that each of them were married multiple times expands the stories within this book, because it did talk about the lives of each of their wives, as well as all of Eleanor's daughters. So she did have two daughters with her first marriage with King Louis, and then I think 3 more with Henry II. So they had Marie and Alex, Matilda, Lenore, and Joanna for sure. And then you get the wives of Richard. Richard and John were mostly the ones discussed, because those were the ones who became kings. Gregory, he did have a wife and stuff, but he was never a king in his own right. And what was interesting is one of Richard's wives, it was known as the only English queen who never set foot in England while she was queen, because he was always in the Crusades, and she was from Navarre, so she never had reason to go to England. And then obviously he married somebody else after. And then John married 2 Isabellas. One, basically he left for a younger version, and unfortunately that younger version was quite young. They're saying 14 at the highest, but it was probably not even close to that when he married her. That was when, shortly after that was when she started having kids, and she had multiple kids with him. So she was the Isabella that most people know about when they're thinking about Queen Isabella. John's wife is the younger one. And then it was just, I actually found the in-laws actually more fascinating than her actual kids. It was interesting to know that the 2 kids from the first wife, husband, never really interacted with any of their other siblings, because she didn't get to inherit the kids when she left and divorced. When their marriage was annulled, the father gets the kids, so she didn't get to really see much of her oldest daughters. But at one point, when the 3 sons tried to overthrow Henry II, Eleanor took their side, and at that time, Navarre and France and stuff, where she was from, they came, they were fighting on the same side. So for a short time in their history, the mother was on the same side as her daughters, who she had previously always had to have been against, because France and England were always at odds. So I found that interesting as well. I wanted to like that book a lot more than I did because I love I love Eleanor and her family so much. But talking about each of the characters was just so dry. It was just like factual and stuff. It didn't really go into an overarching importance or anything. It wasn't very much of a narrative. It just kind of facts and stuff. And I'm horrible at remembering names. So I didn't find it as interesting as I really wanted to, but it was still worth the read because you could kind of see the importance and why she's considered like the mother of, the modern world, because they married into all kinds of different dynasties all through Europe. She even had some who were canonized as saints within her family tree. So Eleanor remains one of my favorite people in history, and this just made it even more enriching to see the scope of her influence in the world. And then you also, within reading that right after reading about the Dark Queens, the Merovingian, I think I got that right, dynasty, which is in France, and you get to see how they rose in power, and you get to see the importance of places like Aquitaine as they're gaining influence and wealth and stuff. I really enjoy that because then you get to see why Aquitaine was so important when Eleanor was around hundreds of years later, and became the one that everybody wanted to marry because it gave them so much power and influence within the world. But it all started, you get to see it at the Merovingian dynasty, which I thought was fascinating. And then I haven't finished this one, but I'm loving this one. And this is Isbella, the Warrior Queen. And I'm kind of glad that I'm not finishing it because it starts in the 1400s, but it's going to go into the 1500s, so I can finish it within Q3 and be completely fine and do my full wrap up. But with this one, you get a whole lot, and I took a lot of notes here, but with Isbella, first of all, it starts out when you already know that she is 23 and she claims the throne herself before her husband can get there. So after her brother dies, she rushes to Castile because Castile is bigger than Aragon, and that's where he's the king of. And she rushes there and claims herself queen, gets herself coronated so nobody else can stop that. And then she finishes, and what she does is gets to control all of that by herself instead of having her husband be part of the king. And then you get backwards. So you get to do, you get the breakdown once again of the Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox religions there. So the Roman Empire versus the Byzantine Empire. And something really important to her childhood was the fall of Constantinople. And it made her very scared of the impending Muslim influence and stuff because she grew up very pious within the church. Her dad died when she was young. Her mother went crazy, and she grew up amongst the church, and that was her life for so long. And then her older brother, Enrique, took the throne after the father's death. And it was a half-brother because the father had been married twice. And so she had to try to insert herself in ways that women at that time didn't always get to. And one of the things she did was she kept being told who she was going to marry. First, it could have been Edward IV, which would have been really interesting for the world because you wouldn't have had the War of the Roses and stuff the way that it came about, because instead of him marrying the commoner Elizabeth Woodville, he would have married her and had all that extra power, and they would have continued down in a really interesting way, because you wouldn't have had to have Henry VIII or any of that, and you wouldn't have also had a whole lot of the Protestant Reformation from the breaking of the church, because she was so strong in her Catholicism that I don't think that would have happened. And then when that fell through, there was a short, brief period that she was then betrothed to his son, Richard III, which we're really glad didn't happen either. So eventually she kept getting, was supposed to be betrothed to all these people, and they all ended up being a lot older than her. And she wanted to choose her king. So she chose her cousin Ferdinand, and they actually went against her brother, went against the church, because they were related, and they didn't get that okay to marry incestually. And so they went against a lot of people to try to marry, and it ended up being kind of a downfall for her, because it put her against her husband, it put her against her brother, it put her against the church. And then Ferdinand actually ended up, as soon as they got married, having all kinds of affairs and sleeping with people and having children out of wedlock. So it kind of upended her life doing that. But then you kind of go away from all of that and get a bit more Spanish history, which I found fascinating. So 2 decades before she was born was the death of Joan of Arc, and she always kind of envisioned herself as like the second coming, another martyr for the faith. You also had the Moors in Spain, which they were called Moors because they were from Morocco, but it was the Muslim invasion coming in. And so as the Ottoman Empire conquest kept putting them more and more at risk as they were infringing upon the country, she lived with that. And what was interesting is you learned that as the Ottoman Empire made its conquest, and they would go, city to city, empire to empire, kingdom to kingdom, and they would put the Jews in control if they had enough Jews there. Otherwise, they would keep their own Muslims there, because the only ones that hated the Christians more than themselves were other Jews, because of how horribly that they had been treated. So you had all of this going on with Jews getting a lot of this power and stuff, Christians getting upset. And then you had a lot of this religious conflict, especially during Isbella's time, when she took the throne finally, was a lot of the forced conversos, they called it, the Jews who converted either for real or for name only to Christianity. There was a mistrust and an outbreak between, violence and killing and stuff for the Christians against the conversos. So all this stuff is happening in her early life. And then you get, you get this continued fear of the Moorish attacks. You get the fact that she was raised in the church, so that's where she gets her extremeness and fundamentalism that later plays a part in her later life. And what was interesting is her brother was thought to have possibly been homosexual, because he only maybe had one daughter, but his wife also cheated on him all the time, and it was very like a known rumor that his one daughter wasn't even his daughter. So it talked about the church's views of homosexuality at that time, and how they weren't against it until different elements came in play, and they had to basically strum up resentment and problems and stuff. It also talked about Greek-inspired history. They, in Spain, considered themselves descendants of the gods. So they mixed monotheism with polytheism within their own history, and inspired themselves with the classical Greek and Roman world, since there was still so many architectural advancements and stuff from Rome that were still in Spain at that time. And then you also had the Portugal-Spanish history, because she is Portuguese descendant. And so she was Portuguese and claimed Greek heritage as well. And she was considered a red-haired beauty at that time. And so when she declared the throne for herself against all odds, she did it before they could name her possible niece as a legitimate heir and therefore part of the throne. So she claimed it first. And in doing so, it made her husband really mad because he wanted the power. And you get all his back history and the corruption and stuff within his family, which is her own family. And in order to appease him, she had to write into law like, hey, I'm in control here. I get to have this in Leon. I get to have all the power, all the influence. Everything is mine. But I guess we can put your name first on things. So now even today, when you learn about what happened in that time frame, including like who funded Columbus, it's Ferdinand and Isabella. It's not Isabella and Ferdinand. It's not Isabella alone, even though she was the one making all the choices and had all of the power. And that is very interesting, since we know not a lot of women had power at the time. And she claimed it for herself without her king. And so what was also interesting is they talked about how 3 of the male members of her family had been sexually assaulted as children and then controlled by their abusers. And so they talked about how that might have influenced not only their violence and their abruptness and getting angry and kind of lashing out and feeling like any kind of slight to them was a huge betrayal. Like all of this was interconnected by their treatment as children. So her father, King Juan, her older brother, King Enrique, and her younger brother, King Afonso. And so Afonso died young, which is why he wasn't in line to the throne when her other brother died. And so the other thing is, I just dropped all of my books. The other thing is that in order, once she went against her brother and married Ferdinand, a lot of her nobility and people went against her. And so she had to try to claim them back. And so the people that she kind of got influence from were really fascinating, because one of them was Afonso, and he was Borges, Rodrigo Borges. And then he, obviously, we know, becomes Pope, and his illegitimate children, Lucretia, Lorenzo, like that era of Borges's, which once again is influenced with the Game of Thrones and even The Godfather. That's who she aligned herself with, as well as Mendoza, who she promised the cardinalship. And with those people on her side, they had the influence that once her brother died, when she claimed herself queen, they made everybody fall in line. So she made, being so young, she made all the right choices. Unfortunately, as soon as she took power, then you had the King of Portugal, who was mad because he had at one time been promised to her, wanting to claim her crown as well. So then as soon as she got her crown, she had to go to war against more cousins, and try to defeat them in Portugal before anything else happened. And so that's the only parts that I got to so far. So I haven't even met when she has the daughter Catherine, who then marries Henry VIII as his first wife. We haven't even got that far. I haven't gotten to Columbus. I haven't gotten to the Spanish Inquisition. So I know I have a lot ahead of me, but I was already fascinated with what I read so far. So anyway, those are the last of my Q2 books for Historathon. And I will write the titles of the ones I read along with the authors, since I know that I didn't say that clearly at the beginning. So anyway, thank you for watching, and happy reading, and have a great day.